Anybody who saw me at Amecon last year, apologies for not changing it from pink. I was going to change it, but then my laptop died and I had to reactivate it and also all of the files for the last 3 years. Thankfully, I had uploaded this to SlideShare so we could get it back and modify it. I didn't have to do it from absolute scratch, but it means I haven't had the time to change the colour. I was going to change it to a different colour, but it'll work. Right. Hello. Stay here, Grace, by the way. Right. Hello. I'm Silicaria, or Grace, that's my actual name. My parents didn't call me Silicaria because that would be really weird. But anyway, this is my panel, the history of magical girl anime. Is that returns, romance, or rondo? This is a Sailor Moon reference because Toei were never particularly clear over what the R in the second season subtitle meant. Some people think it's return, some people think it's romance, and some people think it's rondo, which is something to do with music. I don't know much about music, so I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Or racing on with production before Takeuchi-san and come with more plot.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the first, the first 14 episodes or so is the Doom Tree arc, or the Makaiju arc, which I actually kind of like, with this, pointlessness for 14 episodes while the manga catches up. That's common with ongoing series. Dragon Ball Z had that. Not that Dragon Ball didn't drag on long enough, but you know. Right. Here's my panel outline. I discovered I can put flowers in. I got anything that much. So what makes a magical? What makes a girl magical anyway? I'm going to describe different types of magical girl. I've got the genesis, when it sort of kicked off in the 60s, the history and timeline, where I go over what I personally consider to be the definitive magical girl shows that are actually aimed at the shorter demographic, except for Cutie Honey, who I have to put in there simply because though she was aimed at a male demographic, she introduced so many themes that obviously not do. Looking beyond the shorter demographic, where I will get on to Madoka now that I've seen it this time. Last year I hadn't seen it yet. I was waiting on the DVD coming up because I want to give them money. Magical girls are a worldwide phenomenon, and then Predator references, which I'm not going to go. And I got this from this website, and I got this from that. No, they're just there because you should credit your sources. Right. So what makes a girl magical anyway? Her transformation device makes her magical. That's why I've got her wrote up there. Actually, I would say you define a magical girl as basically being usually a young girl, somewhere between the ages of 8 and about 16. Sometimes you get older ones, sometimes you get much younger ones, but that's the typical age range, who's imbued with power either by birthright, because she's like a witch that's come from a magical witch land, or she's imbued with power through another source, be it magical drawing pads, rings, sweets, brooches, makeup, perfume. I could go on. Hats, shoes, bank cards. No, not really bank cards. Mobile phones are getting more popular as everybody has those these days. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's actually got one where somebody just taps an app and says, "This is my transformation app."
Any app developers in the room? There's your task.
Yeah. I now have superpowers. I'm going to go get coffee. Right. There's different subtypes of magical girl. Cute witches and magical princesses, the Majogo. The ship-shifting magical girls who simulate skills. Magical warriors like your Sailor Moons and Cuties. I forgot to put this one in this first slide, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about phantom thieves this time, which I didn't mention last time, because there's a few of those. I'm going to go on to firstly the magical witch girls, because they, to an extent, they were really the first ones that came about in the 60s. Generically, as I said, witches, either by birthright, like say, Maho Sally. Apologies if I pronounce things wrong. Being dyslexic, it makes me very difficult to get my head around our own language, let alone Japanese. So I sometimes go, yeah, I pronounced that wrong. But anyway, also there might be typos in this. Apologies for that as well. But I've got some examples there. I'm not going to list them all off, but I will mention Maho Sally because she was one of the first. Ojamajo Dorame is a more recent one. Up there I've got Sugar Sugaroon. One of my personal favourites I've listed in there, I haven't put in for the show yet, is Ultramaniac, just because I love the idea of there being co-protagonists where one of them isn't magical and essentially is just the whipping girl for all the magical mistakes ever. All sorts of weird things happen to her. They can often come from a different land, sort of like a magical realm. These magical realms get some of the girliest names ever. They get the Land of Magic, or the Flower Wren Star, or Lovely Dream, or like, it's like clearly marketing executives. What do little girls like? Pink and sugar and rainbows and cherry pie. Let's call it Cherry Pie Land. You often have travellers from other worlds. Sometimes you have little girls imbrued with power by travellers from another land. There's a lot of crossover as things go on of tropes from different subgenres bleeding into each other. That sounded really wrong, but you know what I mean. Then later on, a lot of the magical warriors would be imbrued with powers from travellers from other lands as well. But those are the witches. The girls who would be queen, these tend to be a little bit like your magical witches. In fact, they often are magical witches themselves, but they've got this specific subplot where they are princesses and they are candidates to be queen, and to prove their worth as being queen, they've got to do something on Earth. Either just live a year on Earth, or they've got to collect items and tokens. It's like, I have a magical rainbow gemstone that I've got to imbrue with light, or go collect doohickeys. Lots of doohickeys. That's where the random bit in Sailor Moon, when they were looking for the silver crystal, was introduced. It was not in the manga at all. It's like saying, now you find the rainbow coloured gems and they're inside these bad guys, so go kill them. Except it was clear, it was actually curing them, but yeah. That's a picture from Comet-san, or Cosmic Background Girl. I just like it because it quite clearly shows she's a princess. And there's her mum and dad. There's a great parody of this that I'll mention in the section later on, which makes me laugh. But shape-shifting for fun and profit. Usagi, who is a crybaby, plus her magical power device turns her into a bus conductor who's crying anyway. So yeah, this is often a side power. Cutie Honey had this as a side power. Sailor Moon had this as a side power. But there was quite a lot. In fact, it was probably the most popular type of magical girl up until the end of the 80s, who had some form of shape-shifting to often turn herself into some sort of glamorous career that little girls aspired to, stereotypically speaking, like air hostesses or like nurses. Some of them were progressive enough to let them be doctors as well. Things that is considered feminine careers as well, like I don't know, ballerina, gymnast, and to allow them to actually take on the abilities of that person, and sometimes just because it would be helpful for the situation that the person was in. Some shapeshifters actually change into actual other people instead of just changing into a generic career. And I'll talk about that in a minute when I get on to some examples. Sorry if I keep saying that, I'll try not to keep repeating myself. Who needs Simon Cowell anyway? The Magical Girl Idols. Basically, this one got really popular in the 80s. Magical girls who basically, I say basically too much, magical girls who are given the power to become older, usually get really good singing voices out of it, although some of them are just good singers already anyway, and therefore can become idols. They get scouted, they go to auditions, they do really well, often have a time limit of a year to their powers, as a lot of magical girls do, because the help that usually is in response to it, helping out some alien or some magical force when like their spaceship's crashed and like, I will help you get something.
Or for cancer.
Or because they're dying, but I'll get onto that one in a moment. But yes, that would be hilarious on Britain's Got Talent. It's like, what can you do? Well, I was 6, but now I'm 16, I'm going to sing. Like, Simon Cowell just goes awful. Oh, the Magical Girl Warriors. These are the ones that probably most Westerners, or at least the ones in the English-speaking West, are familiar with. Lots of places in Europe, like Italy and Germany and Spain, got earlier magical girls across well before we in the English-speaking world did. And while there was a couple of examples of early magical girl shows getting to America, they didn't really make that much of an impression on the Western anime fandom, not massively, not until really the 90s and Sailor Moon, and to a certain extent some of the more grown-up shows that are, from an anime fandom perspective, things like Devil Hunter Yoko and stuff, made like an impression on us. But these are girls who were imbued with power to fight things, grand evils, threatening the entire world or even universe, and they're given the task because they are specially selected or it's in their heritage. After all, I always find it funny if they actually think about it. Why in the heck will you pick teenagers? But that's a good question of all anime and Super Sentai and Power Rangers. And why on earth would you ask this of 15-year-olds? They're like, I'm going to go and I'm going to save the world, and they're dead teenager. You know, give the kid a crack military commando and give him the magical powers, though might not want to put him in a dress. Unless you do want to put him in a dress, it would certainly baffle the enemy.
Or horrify them.
Bit of both. Or do, depending on the enemy, it might not horrify them. These somewhat less common. I often get the male version as side characters. Phantom Thieves or Kaito. These are very popular in Japan in general, outside the magical girl demographic. For male characters, you've got Lupin III and Gentlemen Thieves who leave calling cards, well, not all, but leave calling cards saying, I'm going to steal your great art piece or some sort of high-priced thing. Try and stop me, and they use stealth and tactics to get past the police, and they do it for the thrill. With the magical girl versions, they tend to have honourable reasons for doing this. Like, I've got a picture up there with a wanted poster of Saint Tail. Now, the interesting thing about Saint Tail is she has a transformation sequence, at least in the anime, but she doesn't actually use magic per se. She actually honestly uses magic tricks, like sleight of hand and things, to get past all of these sort of blockades and things that the police put up. a lot of the time they have a best friend or somebody in their class who is really wants to capture this phantom thief because it like they're related to the police and they feel like they put one over on the police all the time for their parents or whatever's on and they must capture them. And somehow don't notice that their best friend, who usually doesn't look that facially different, is always disappearing around about the same time that thievery takes place. But there you go. One of these things that anime characters are often blind to. So, what does all of this mean? Well, the thing about anime in general, even anime aimed at children, is it has a tendency to get into the psychology of the characters. It reminisces on the nature of friendships, the nature of identity and self-doubt. I mean, there's the famous part where Usagi from Sailor Moon doesn't really want to accept her sort of role as Sailor Moon, especially in Sailor Moon R, where she goes through this psychological bit where her powers won't work because she isn't committed to being Sailor Moon because she got the chance of a normal life again and she really regrets losing that. I've got a picture of Tezuka's example, which I haven't put in this year. I mentioned it last year, but I will say Tezuka's example was basically like sexual health education for young girls. That's why she, the whole premise is that her mother died and left her an orphan with two younger brothers, and her mother petitioned God to create this collection of magical sweets, blue and red ones. One type makes her older, one type makes her younger. If she takes two at once, she can regress to fetal stage and therefore become any animal because of the whole idea being that at fetal stage you have the potential to be any species, which is completely scientific nonsense. Tezuka liked to play. Tezuka was a very intelligent man who knew his science, but liked to play hard and fast with things just for rule of cool. And apparently that used to be a going through before DNA was really mapped. But this was made in the 1970s and DNA was mapped in the 50s, so I assume he was just faffing about for the enjoyment of being able to change people into frogs. Right, the genesis of Magical Girl anime. Right. In the beginning, there was Mitsuteri Yokohama and Fujio Akatsuki, I think, if I pronounced that right. The first two Magical Girl series are Mitsuno Ako-chan and Makoto Sugai Sally. These are the ones that most people would say are the first two. It depends on how you look at things as which one was the first one itself, because Ako-chan's manga came out first, but Makoto Sugai Sally's was animated before Ako-chan. So they sort of share the moniker of being the first two. Ako-chan strictly came out before, certainly as a whole, but they both have big impacts on the genre because they introduced the magical device where a little girl from our world is imbued with the power to shapeshift, as I said, or the travelling witch from another realm. They were both inspired by the American show Bewitched. Sol Sachs created Bewitched in the 1960s, very popular on the US television. It was arguably aimed at sort of a family demographic. I'm not going to say adult demographic because that implies to us. No, but it's like it's sort of it's the sort of situations that are going to be like adults are going to find themselves in, like, oh, they're the mother-in-law and or Snoopy neighbours or so on and so forth. I'll go on to Bewitched in case anybody doesn't know Bewitched. I mean, I think a lot of us will, but I'll just go over the premise. Samantha there, in the middle of the black and white photo, is a witch from a witch land. She's married to the mortal Darren on the side, and her mother, his mother-in-law, is also a witch and hates him. And has a tendency to turn him into things or change him back into being a kid, or giving. Her father shows up and she has to turn him into a newspaper at one point to save his life. It's that sort of show. This actually had a massive impact in Japan. It was incredibly popular. It's more obvious with Maho Tsugai Sally because she's a witch, and the animated sequence even looks a little bit like the animated sequence that the witch begins with. Later on, there will be a show created for the for another demographic called Oko-sama wa Marshal Shoujo, Bewitched Darkness, which draws on the. It's got a lot of references in there. It draws on the original Japanese title for Bewitched. It was called basically My Wife is a Witch, Oko-sama wa Marshal, Oko-sama wa Marshal. And it would later actually get a Japanese drama, 12-episode Japanese drama in 2004, created based on it. But Oko-sama wa Marshal Shoujo Bewitched Darkness it's also got Agnes in there, and Agnes Moorehead was Endora's actress, so there's a fair few references in there. Right, I'm going to go on to the history and timeline now. As I've mentioned, Himitsu no Ako-chan, very popular in Japan. It's had several iterations, and also set to it. You can see, I should have changed that. Last year, there was a live-action movie made where she was a little older. But the idea is she breaks a mirror and gives it a respectful burial, which apparently is not an uncommon thing in Japan. Like, if you've got a cherished item and it breaks, like actually treating it with respect, like you would with a dead pet or something. I know that sounds a way. And burying it was a common thing to do. So the spirit of the mirror realm is so moved by this that it comes down and imbues her with a new magical mirror that allows her to shapeshift into anyone or anything. She has to be careful that she can shapeshift into something that can speak. I do believe there was one plot device when she turned into either an animal or something, and she was a little bit stuck because she couldn't figure out how to say her reversal transformation phrase. Not a good situation to get yourself into. Maho Tsukai Sally. She was called Sunny at first until the Sony Corporation complained. Yeah, because it sounded too much like Sony, so she was called Sally in the anime. This has had several remakes because again it was very popular. The colour one is one of the remakes. She's the princess from the magical kingdom of Astoria, and she wanted to come to Earth to experience it, just to make some friends. She uses her magic to help solve problems. It's very inspired by Bewitched. The later versions, the 1989 and the 1999 movie, though I think I looked that up and it's not really that long. It's like when you get anime movies in like 20 minutes. Basically there she did actually have one of these plots where she needed to do something specific on Earth to like reconnect the bonds between the two lands. That's a very common plot that started to show more in the 70s and 80s, so they put it into the 1980s version of Sally there. said before, those introduced the several tropes of magical travellers, of transformation trinkets, of transformation words, and they were both around about the 10 to 12 mark, and both series were aimed at girls maybe around the 4 to 13 mark as well, so those were early examples. By the 1970s, things had moved on a bit because it started to involve older protagonists. A lot of these protagonists shifted up to being about 15 or so. I think, honestly, a lot of that was so they could include fan service and not feel like really creepy, even though the horse still feels kind of creepy. I mean, there's Lun Lun from Flower Girl Lun Lun in a bath. Bath scenes show so much in anime, but then sometimes it's arguably not fan service. It's just sometimes it's because there's communal bathing in Japan and they don't see anything wrong with it. They also started to introduce your trials of suitability to become queen, as I mentioned, rivals, somewhat darker theme, because Melmore was made in this decade with, as I said, basically had sex education in it, like, well, sexual health education, because it also goes into whether she should breastfeed her younger brother. What? I don't know.
This is what essentially was experimenting with accent.
Possibly. Also, as I said already, fan service was introduced here. Right. This one, Mako no Mako-chan, Magical Mako or Mako the Mermaid, is based on Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid. There's been several adaptations in the magical girl world of the Little Mermaid. I mean, I think people might be more familiar with Mermaid Melody Pish Pish Pish, where they also are magical singers and warriors and mermaids. It's like, let's cram as many girly things into one show. It actually comes out quite decent because I read some of the manga, but it's like girly time into one distinct package. Basically, this premise, it starts out just like the Little Mermaid. She's the daughter of the King of the Sea. Because it's Japanese, they actually use the traditional Japanese legendary King of the Sea. In this, she goes to the sea witch after she's rescued a boy from drowning and fallen in love with him and asks to become human. This version, she doesn't lose the ability to speak or have her tongue cut out. I don't know if anybody knows that, but in the original version of The Little Mermaid, Hans Christian Andersen didn't just do this like, I will take your voice. He had her tongue cut out, which just goes to show you how disturbing some fairy tales are. She goes to the human world. Her father gives her a pendant called the Tear of the Mermaid that's magical, that can help her out on land. He also has a tendency to show and berate her. I mean, I've seen clips of where, and what gets me about this is, you can see there as a mermaid, she's got Lady Godiva hair basically, like stopping you from seeing any like boobage. But I've seen a clip where she's standing around in a red bikini, and her father shows up and it's like, I don't approve of that, and puts her in one of those sort of Victorian, like swimming suits. And she's like, no, I want to be in a bikini. And she magics herself back into the bikini, and I'm sitting there thinking, but she's a mermaid who's swimming around without any top on. Why do you only object now? Strange. I've also seen another clip where her father goes to the land and decides to check out human culture, see what he thinks of it, and goes to a film, and there's a girl an actress in it who looks a lot like his daughter, who basically, all you see in this film is like some sort of dance party, very 70s dance party as well. It's like disco, flashing red and green lights, and then she gets stabbed, and the movie ends with her dying, and he's like, I can't believe the humans kill each other off for their entertainment. It's sick. I mean, I don't know what it was in Japanese, but that's it. That's what happened. He thought it was that we murder people on screen for fun. And he was like, no, it's an actress. And he was actually really disturbed that she looked like his daughter. He was creeped out by it. He was like, no, we don't kill people. Also, she's going on that picture, she seems to have a pet bear of some description. And she's actually taken in on land by a fisherman and his 2 twin grandsons. There's a lot of this cases of people being adopted by human families, sometimes actually hypnotising their way in, which I always thought was a bit creepy, but there you go. You do have a daughter that you didn't remember yesterday. Cutie Honey. As I said, this was aimed at boys. It was actually going to be aimed at girls until they ran another Magical Girl series in the same time slot, and it kind of bombed. So that was called Limit Chan, actually. So they redeveloped it, and it's Going a Guy, and Going a Guy likes his fan service, and basically made Cutie Honey, who is very, 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 very famous in Japan. I mean, it's said that most Japanese people know the Cutie Honey thing off by heart, or at least a lot of them do. It's like, if you can get Usopp singing, room schools Usopp singing the Pokemon theme, it's like that. Again, this is one of the, a lot of these early shows got lots and lots of remakes. We've got 2 live-action remakes, the movie and the live-action series called Cutie Honey the Live. We've got R.E. Cutie Honey, which is based on the movie, and sort of, it was a tie-in. There's Shin Cutie Honey, or New Cutie Honey, with the larger breasts, because that was
the 90s.
Yeah, and it was a more adult series. It wasn't, actually I think it was the Shin Cutie Honey, yes, it was 1994. It's rated 15, so it's not porn, but it's very, very heavy fan service. In comparison to the earlier ones, they were a bit more like wink, wink, nod, nod, whereas this one was a bit more to the point, shall we say. And Cutie Honey Flash, which is was a Magical Girls show aimed at magical girls, and it was the show that took over when Sailor Moon finished in Japan, literally in the same time slot, and had a lot of people working on it who were working on Sailor Moon, which is why that one there, with the white gloves on, third along next to the big one, kind of facially looks a lot like Sailor Moon started, because all of the animators just basically moved across because they needed a job. Like, you know, naturally. Right. Hananoko Lunlun, or Flower Child Lunlun, or Lulu the Flower Angel, or Lulu, I think is what she was called in somewhere in Europe rather than Lunlun. Lunlun is, what is interesting is this is when, I think this is possibly the first protagonist that wasn't Japanese for a Magical Girl show. Lunlun is, well, Japanese, or, you know, a traveller from another dimension who happens to know Japanese fluently. Whereas this one, although it was obviously in Japanese, you were supposed to sort of think she was speaking French most of the time. She's a 15-year-old orphan who is got the heritage of the plant spirits on her mother's side, these plant spirits had left Earth eons ago because they thought humans had become too greedy and superficial and corrupted. But some of them stuck behind and interbred with us, so apparently they didn't hate us that much. It comes to a point when there's a new monarch needed. The king of the flower realm of the flowering star is dying, and before his son, Prince, can ascend the throne, they need to find the flower of 7 colours, which is somewhere in Europe. They don't know where. So Lun is tasked with the task of wandering all the way across Europe to find this flower, which is 15. And they've got, like, well, the thing is, there's this mysterious photographer, not exactly tuxedo mask, but sort of early mysterious protector, who follows her around. Like that's not obvious who he's supposed to be, but she can ask any flower with the power of her magical pendant to give her a set of clothes that are suitable for a task. For example, she can go to a flower and says, I need to be a sailor because I need to get on a boat and sail somewhere, or I need mountain climbing gear, or I need the princess outfit for some reason, because I'm going to a party. I need to be a matador. Yeah, she goes to Spain at one point, so yeah. So basically, apparently flowers give you clothes if you've got the right magical pendant, and you're and you're in a descendant of flower spirits. This one used a lot of flower imagery, as you can see. She also had 2 flower spirits, a dog and a cat, who actually look human in their true forms, but with wings. But they become a cat and dog on Earth just because it's less conspicuous than having like a man and a woman wandering around who happen to have wings with you. The 1980s. This is the big studio for magical girls. Before this was largely toy. There had been a few exceptions. In the 80s, we had Mickey Momo, which came out of Aside Productions, and later became Production Reed. But the big powerhouse of the 80s in terms of magical girls was Studio Piero. And this is when the magical girl idol singer genre really took off. And this is when we actually had a couple of crossovers between the magical girl, between the Studio Piero magical girls, and also Mickey Momo crossed over with other magical girls as well. And the marketing for these series really picked up because it was the 80s. And anybody who looks at cartoons from the 80s, like Transformers or My Little Pony, hey, I'm Pegasus, so I'm fine with saying this, but yes, like lots of nostalgias and stuff there, but they were very, like, you could tell they were made by a production committee going, how can we make these things appealing? I mean, Gem is in the holograms, was very 80s with big hair and the magical singing, but I'll start talking about the individual shows. No, oh, water here, yes. Thank God, I'm dying. Mickey Momo was incredibly important in terms of catching on with an older demographic as a sort of periphery demographic, because some people would argue that she was the first example of Moe really catching on. I have heard that online. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if other people said, oh no, it was even earlier, but this was It was so popular, as you can see, there was a lot of OVA, original video animation one-off things afterwards, and there was a 1991 series that drew on the original 1982 series. But basically, this is a magical princess from another land coming to Earth to try and reconnect the Earth with her home realm of Feneranasa, which is in the sky. She has to try and reconnect human hearts to the wonder of magic and help them out with this, that and the other, like sort of, she can turn older, like many magical girls before her, and she can turn into police women, and nurses, and I think she actually turns into a sort of superhero role at some point as well. So clearly, this show kind of introduced a lot of the idea of things being a little taking darker twists. I mean, there's a very famous bit of the first Minky Momo series, and it is a spoiler, but
it's years old.
It's years old, and it's very well known, and it's basically, the reason I've got two Momos up there is because the first Momo in 1982, it got into to about the 50th episode, and she lost her magic, which is quite normal for magical girls to lose the magic at some point and have to sort of get their magic back. The next episode, she still hadn't got her magic back, and she got hit by a toy truck and she died. She does come back to life, but without any magical powers, because she chooses to be reborn as a baby to her adopted Earth family instead of becoming a magical princess again. Basically, the reason they went for that was because, despite its popularity with an older demographic, it lost a lot of money when a toy company pulled out of sponsorship for Minky Momo. So the production team thought, well, we'll get them back by making a toy company kill our main character with a toy truck, an evil toy truck.
It's not so subtle rage thing.
Yeah, basically. The 1991 adaptation, there's a different Momo who comes from Feneranasa, which is from the sea instead of the sky. And at first it looked like it was just a remake, and with no connections to the original, like it was a different alternate universe, but it turns out it isn't, because the new Momo winds up bumping into the old Momo, who has since, because it was about 10 years later, has actually grown up to be old enough to be the age she originally was. So they do have a crossover there. The second Momo is actually threatened several times with different toy trucks and things. She actually escapes it, the second Momo. But yeah, apparently people who watched the second series were like, thought it was tense the first time, but apparently it happened another time, and people were like, okay, this is starting to get stupid. Stop trying to run our main character over, please. This is the Studio Piero girls. We've got Magical Angel Creamy Mammy, Magical Fairy Persia, or Pelsia, Magical Star Magical Emmy. These were pretty much all girls who were young and were given the power by whatever force from beyond the stars or another dimension to turn into older versions of themselves. A lot of the time to become either an idol singer, or in sort of Magical Emmy's case, she actually got real magic as well as becoming older, so that she could save her family's sort of magic act, the sleight of hand stage magic act. So she cheats. But Emmy does actually give up her powers for that precise reason, because she starts to actually feel like, I'm actually cheating at this, and I should give up and try and become good at sleight of hand genuinely. Creamy Mammy was one of the first magical idol singers. She turned older, her hair changed a different colour. She's given this ability for, like, the ability to change back and forth between forms for a year, and becomes a famous idol singer because of it. Magical Fairy Persia. What gets me about this series is most of these magical girls are generic little girl in Japan going to school, having fun. Persia was some sort of wild child that ran around the Serengeti, and some Japanese people, like, who were holidaying in Africa, found her and thought, that's not healthy, let's take her to Japan and give her a normal life, even though that's not what she's used to at all. She's used to running around the Serengeti with, like, lions and stuff. And when she was on the aeroplane over, she was contacted by she's contacted and transported to the land of Lovely Dream. Yeah, and tasked with the power to turn into an old version of herself. And like Nicky Moore, she had to reconnect, like, the minds and hearts of the people on Earth to Lovely Dream to save it. Right. More Studio Pierrot girls. Magical Idol Pastel Yumi, who, despite being called Magical Idol, is the only Studio Pierrot girl actually that I know of that doesn't turn older. She's a bit more like, where are you going? Oh, I'll find it there. She's basically the Japanese Penny Crayon. She can draw anything. She uses an activation phrase and a magical pencil to bring her creations to life, or to make, like, things like hot air balloons and what have you. They had a crossover. I had a couple of crossover, like 20-minute OVAs in the 80s. Mammy, Emmy and Persia crossed over in the first one, the Charming Young Girl Magic Trio in 1986, where they get stuck in their older forms and they've got to guess which of their phrases will turn them back while jumping into some sort of, like, I think, hot spring. It didn't have much of a plot to it. The Witch Girl Club Quartet, Alien X from the A Zone, all four of them crossed over. It's kind of a fourth wall breaking OVA, because I have actually seen bits of this on YouTube, unsubtitled. So basically, they get like this tentacle monster roaming around Japan, attacking teenagers and taking their life energy, and the girls have to fight them. And Pastel Yumi provides powered armor. There's some weird scenes in it, like the Japanese government apparently likes kidnap magical girls and put them to work until they realise that they don't have any magical powers anymore and they get disappointed. And then there's Harbour Light Story. I'm not going to even try to pronounce that. Fashion Lala. You're in there? Never mind. Basically, this is a Cinderella story. Mabel is a girl who lives with her mean and demanding family, like in Cinderella. She's got one cousin that's nice, but all the rest of them are quite horrible to her. She wants to be a fashion designer, and then she's, after some exploits, including biker gangs, bombings, a disco competition that's a fix, because A magical book in her attic starts to glow. It reveals 2 dinosaurs who transform her into Fashion Lala with the power to save the day with the power of disco and fashion. I think she basically just aces the competition, and then everybody's happy and don't want to bomb each other anymore. This has got some elements that later would go on in the 90s to become Fancy Lala, which is a bit more of a typical, and a lot of people say better, ongoing series instead of just a one-off OVA, which that was, where she combines sort of pastel-y ability to draw her own fashion designs, and the magical idol singer getting older thing together, and it generally looked a lot better animated as well. I mean, the one thing that I've got a solid description of what actually happens in Fashion Lala, because I didn't have time to actually watch it myself because I was doing this like on Thursday. I have to admit I was because of the computer crash I was having, I was like going back and reformatting stuff I wanted to put in. Basically says that was it was very, very, very 80s, and on top of that there was weird stuff like the mayor of the town was at one point found in bed with his own daughter.
What? That's weird.
That's just what the hell, Japan. And this was apparently aimed at young girls. I was like, oh, incest. Right. In the 1990s, this is when, although there had been magical warriors beforehand, predominantly Cutie Honey, and also some of the girls turned older, like Linky Moore, and as I mentioned, the warrior, the Alien X and the Ayacon movie. There had been examples of superheroics and girls turning into superheroes before. It had never been like, other than Cutie Honey, it had never been a dedicated show about that. There had been one-off episodes and stuff aimed at little girls. And it was in the 90s with Sailor Moon coming to prominence where that became a really established magical warrior genre, especially the magical warrior teen genre, where there's more than one of them. Because before that, there had only really been Cutie Honey on her own. And the adaptation of Cutie Honey in the 90s, Cutie Honey Flash actually introduced a rival warrior as well. Clearly, things were starting to branch out more. So I'm going to first start off with an example that doesn't fall into that. It didn't tally, despite me going on about magical warriors for the last few minutes or so. But Hime-chan's ribbon, or Hime-chan no ribbon. Himeko is a 14-year-old tomboy. She tends to go by the name of Hime-chan, and she's approached by the blonde in the corner there, who's her doppelganger from a magical land, who's a princess. He gives her a magical ribbon and brings her toy lion to life because she wanted a friend who knew what was going on. Well, she had a friend, but she wanted a friend who knew what was going on in her life with magic, and she couldn't exactly tell people, although a couple of people do find out. At first, she only gives her the power to shape-shift into other people for a maximum of an hour, because if she doesn't turn back, she could get stuck in that other person's form for the rest of her life. So there is an element of like, you have to watch your turns here, otherwise you'll get stuck. But it also later goes on to actually give her a few more abilities, which I think is rather nice, because it means she's got other things going on other than just turning over or turning into somebody else. It gives the ability to shrink others, and grow and all like to bigger and to make other things and objects bigger, to stop time, although apparently that really screws with the ribbon's internal timer, so it's possibly not advisable, and also it gives us the ability to create sort of clones of ourselves that you can send out so that people don't, I think that's to try and make sure that people don't find out that she's got this power, because she has her friend Daichi, he's not my boyfriend, I swear, Daichi, does find out, because he basically saves her life. And then there's another guy who goes to her school who knows from the outset, because he's from the magical land himself. So I think basically the king and queen of the magical kingdom was sick of people finding out the secret, and were like, you know, we're going to have to, like, they say, if any more people find out, we're going to wipe everybody's memory of the whole affair. They wind up she winds up getting the power to create doubles of herself, to sort of, like, no, I'm not Michelle, look, there she is. Sailor Moon. This is the one that pretty much everyone knows in terms of magical girl anime. At least, this is the one that made the biggest impact in the English-speaking world. This and possibly Cardcaptor Sakura, which I'll talk about momentarily. There's Usagi with her meatball hair, as the dog calls it, or dango, as the Japanese version calls it. She's a crybaby. She's wholly unsuitable to basically be a superheroine. But Luna, the cat that over here that the Sailor Mercury is holding, comes across her and realises she is Sailor Moon. I love the fact that Luna was like, oh shit. And very popular series, established the team of magical girls as being colour-coded, Super Sentai inspired, like similar uniformed girls, and started off with collecting the first 5 in the first season, and as you can see there, went a bit crazy with the amount of characters that wound up, because that's just the anime. I mean, the manga has like the asteroid Sailor Senshi, and the like loads of different Sailor Senshi, and the people, especially in Stars, it's like, there's a Sailor Senshi for sandwiches. I mean, there's not.
Stars is where it lost its shit, let's be honest.
Yeah. I mean, it is Stars where you've got the Starlights in the back there, who basically could, who in the anime, not so much in the manga where they just posed as boys, but actually were girls just dressed up as guys. But in the manga, but in the anime, they actually, like, what's the best way to disguise to make our princess who we're looking for find us? We'll sing about her. But wouldn't it be a bit weird for a girl band to sing about wanting a princess? I don't know, let's all turn ourselves into dudes. And then when they turn back even though when we turn back into Sailor Senshi, wear the most revealing outfits in the entire series, and they might actually be made of leather.
But our faces don't change.
Yeah, our faces don't change because we're a very pretty feminine boy band. We're kind of like One Direction, except as far as I'm aware, One Direction don't turn into women on occasion. I mean, they might.
If they ever make a One Direction anime, we'll know what they'll have to do.
Is that just no Prince Sama? Only One Direction doesn't have dead, awesome, different coloured hair, which would make them more entertaining to me.
Or a school principal that's voiced by Watanabe.
Yeah. lots of different, like, Sailor Moon had a lot of series, the ongoing anime, the manga, they've got the 20th anniversary remake that was supposed to have come out by now, but it's been pushed back, thank you, Toei. As well as live action series and the musicals, which ran from 1993 to 2005 and will be returning this year. But this year's version, it's a sort of like the Takarazuka review, whether it's all women, tuxedo mask, woman, bad guys, women, pretending to be dudes. It looks really pretty and I think it's going to be epic, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. Yay! Clams take on the magical girl, Little Witch genre. I mean, they had done Magic Knight Rayearth before this, and I have read the Rayearth manga, but I always get with me, they are magical girls, but it's sort of more inspired by JRPGs than anything else, Rayearth. I give it a big recommendation because I think it's a good series, but Cardcaptor Sakura was probably the second anime that made a really big impact on me. The first one was Sailor Moon, the second one was Cardcaptor Sakura. I had seen anime before, but I just sort of put them down as, well, I know they're Japanese kids shows, and I find them entertaining, but it doesn't make me want to go and look up anything else. It was Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura that made me really want to get into anime. The plot of Cardcaptor Sakura is basically Sakura Kinomoto comes home one day and she hears a noise in her father's library. She wanders in and she opens this book and all of the cards are scattered, the magical tarot cards in this deck, essentially that's what they are scattered to the winds, and she awakens the beast of the sail, Kera-chan there, a little cute thing that can eventually turn into a massive like lion with wings. With an Osaka accent, because the book was in Osaka for so long, you picked up the accent. It's like Doctor Who. Lots of planets have an Osaka. Basically, it was pretty much one of the first clamp works to become very, very popular in the West. I think it introduced a lot of people to clamp in general and made them such a known name in the Western anime community. It sort of bridges the gap between a cute witch and a magical warrior series, really, because she's a bit of both. I mean, she isn't really fighting any great evil per se. Well, maybe once the second series comes around, there is Ariel in his tests, but even then he's not per se evil, he's just nefarious. What I love about Cardcaptor Sakura is it's got some of the most endearing characters ever, because Sakura is adorable. Her brother and his boyfriend are adorable. Tomoyo, who has a crush on her best friend who has a crush on her, is adorable. And it was also, I remember reading it, I remember watching the dub and knowing a bit that the dub was bad, because this was when I was first getting the internet. Like myself, was again, something seems off about this, and I looked it up and said, the Americans cut out all of the LGBT things. I was like, oh. So I started to get the manga, and I was like thinking, wow, this is different. But at least I will say, at least when it was on Nick UK and IDV, they did actually show them in the correct episode order. It was the poor Americans who got them all out of whack, and they tried to make Shaoran co-main character with her, which didn't really work because it's a girls' series. Don't try and trying to elevate the male side character to be co-star, and then what is the point of dubbing a girls series and trying to make it like, but he's just as important?
But don't you know, the girls don't watch that TV. It's all got to be for boys.
Alright, it gets on my nerves. That's why I'm so glad. They're starting to do a little bit different now with some more girls. Right, Kamikaze Kaito Job. This is one of the series I was talking about with the Phantom Thieves. Maro Kusakabe is the reincarnation of the legendary Joan of Arc. I love the idea that basically Japan hasn't quite gotten its head around the fact that Christianity doesn't really believe in reincarnation unless you're Jesus. Right? But she's the reincarnation of Joan of Arc, and she's on a mission from God to eliminate demons that are latching on to great works of art and mesmerising the people who look at it and corrupting them from the inside. So she's got to go around and cleanse these works of art of the evil. But when she does so, it has a basically it gets rid of the piece of art in the first place. Therefore, she's got a reputation as being a thief. And she also, she does, sorry, I've got a dry throat. She does also send a corn card out first to walk and say, I'm gonna go after this bit of art.
What's the shine?
For the moles.
The laws. But her best friend Miyako has vowed she will one day capture Kaito-Jean for her apparent crimes, and it means that Maron's got to sort of tiptoe around the fact that her best mate's going on about, I hate that damn thief. Maron's just like, I'm going to go over here.
Black pictures in that while fighting the English in France.
Yeah, that would have been way more like, I've got a ribbon! And then there's just a guy in chainmail going, that's not going to really hurt, I'm in chainmail. I'm going to steal your art. I'm like, it's the Middle Ages, our art's odd looking anyway. There was, basically, when we opened in the series, she's actually had these powers for some time. And a new phantom thief called Kaito Sinbad appears on the scene. And she and her little mascot, Finfish, the angel, say, he must be evil, he must be working for the devil, he must be the opposite of us. In the meantime, she's also just had a new handsome but irritating neighbour moving to one block of you know, and is starting to torment her. This was the first popular work by a mangaka called Arina Tanemura, who went on to create quite a lot more magical girls. I'm going to talk about another one of her works in the 2000s decade when she made another one. And the interesting thing about this show is most magical girls, as people, are usually relatively happy. I mean, they can be crybabies, or they can be dead, like tomboyish, like Sakura and Hime-chan. Maron, not so much. Maron's kind of hiding a lot of internal pain because basically her parents are divorced and have both working abroad and sort of have left her alone in a block of flats to look after herself and essentially forgotten her. So she does have some sort of, she is kind of broken inside. And it doesn't help. Right, this is going to be a massive spoiler. Does anybody mind? Right. It turns out all this time she thought she was on a mission from God. Finfish, her little angelic mascot, is actually working for the devil, and she's been doing the devil's work for him. Until that becomes apparent, and she's she does travel back in time in the manga and meets the original Joan of Arc on the pyre as she's been burnt to death. And also one of the monsters, it said that she'll only have her powers while she's still a virgin. So some of the monsters kind of figure out there's a way around that. It doesn't go there, but eventually in the manga she gets together with Sinbad, and they do the deed, and it turns out she doesn't have to be a virgin, she just has to be pure of heart, and they had it wrong. But the original Joan of Arc couldn't bring about her godly powers anymore, because apparently she had them, because one of the guards had apparently raped her.
Oh my God.
And that's why she couldn't save herself from being burnt to death, because that had happened. Yeah, in the manga, I'm not sure they went into that in the anime, but they definitely went into it in the manga. I'm reading this, I was thinking, well, that went dark. This ran in Reborn magazine, which is aimed at like 8-year-old girls as well. I'm like, Japan! Right. The magical girls of the 2010s and 2000s.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I'm gonna talk about these. Here we go. Searching for the full moon, or full moon, or Savishte. This again, another really Tanemura manga. I love Tanemura-san's work, but all of her faces look the same. This is in the trademark Tanemura style as well. Is let's take a magical girl trope that's usually did happen, like a little girl gets to be an idol singer. This is little girl desperately wants to be an idol singer because she promised another orphan that they would both follow their dreams, and she actually can't be an idol singer for several reasons. Her grandmother hates music, she's too young to audition, and she's dying of throat cancer. Yeah. Two Shinigami come to check on how she's doing, because they know she's going to die in about a year's time. It turns out she can see them because she's dying, and they let slip that she's going to die. And her reaction is like, well, if I'm going to die, I'll go quietly and won't put up any fuss, and because they're trying to scout her to become a Shinigami herself, because that's how it works in it. And I'll agree to that as long as for the rest of the year, I get to try and be a magical, I get to try and be an idol singer. So the male and female Shinigami, the male Shinigami is like, okay, then I'll give you the power to turn into a healthy 16-year-old blonde.
Why not?
Why a death god needs the power to turn like 12-year-olds into 16-year-olds, I don't know. But apparently he had nothing better to do. So yeah. So she auditions under the name Full Moon, and her hope is to try and meet back up with this this other orphan that she met in her orphanage, and get her songs out to the US. popularity, because we know so many J-pop stars are popular in America. Yeah. And with Tanamura again, there's a lot of plot twists and a lot of things that turn out to be not as you're expecting it. I mean, the whole premise is this girl's dying. Let's make her on. Let's put her on Japan. Let's put her on Japan's Got Talent because she's dying. Well, actually, no. Come to think of it, Britain's Got Talent would like love that sort of thing. They love sob stories. So there you go. And the Pretty Cure franchise. Starting with 2004's Futari wa Pretty Cure, not Futanari wa Pretty Cure. That's something different. Very disturbing. I'll leave that. Then, often simply called Pre-Cure for short. This is basically what is the main magical warrior today. As you can see, there's rather a lot of them. Because a bit like Super Sentai or Power Rangers, they actually swap out the cast every year. I mean, there's a couple of exceptions to that where, for example, the first two did get a sequel series about themselves, and then they added a third girl in. And also, I think Pretty Cure 5 got a sequel series that carried on the cast. But most of the rest of them, it's like a new set of girls each year. There have been a few crossover movies, which I've yet to watch because I do not know how you can keep a beat on that many characters and be
Spoilers, it doesn't.
I assume that was probably the case. Here we go. Futari wa Pre-Cure, Futari wa Pre-Cure Max Heart, Futari wa Pre-Cure Splash Star, Yes Pre-Cure 5, Yes Pre-Cure 5 Bobo, Fresh Pre-Cure, Heart Pre-Cure, which is supposed to be really, really good. It's like deconstruction and has some different twists. Sweet Pre-Cure, Smile Pre-Cure, and Doki Doki Pre-Cure.
And every year the hair gets bigger.
Yes!
2014 will be Afro Cure.
Yeah. Also, 2014 will be Afro Pre-Cure with the 45 bajillion frills, and I think we suffocated her with her dress. Because the dresses just get more and more ostentatious as well on top of all that. Right. Shugo Shara. This is one of my favourites. I've been watching it on Crunchyroll. It's just crazy. I just love the premise of it. It's like, yeah. So one day this girl wakes up and she's laid 3 eggs. She actually thinks she's like, she wakes up and says, when she more or less exactly says, I did not learn this in a sex health class, actually. And I just given birth in the
It's not a chicken.
But the 3 eggs are actually sort of represent her would-be selves, because they're hatches into those 3 little floating people. She later gets another one, who basically, she herself puts up a very cool and tough exterior, but deep down she's actually quite shy and doesn't know how to interact with people. So people just think, people have actually taken from that she's some sort of badass that will beat the crap out of people if they mess with them, when she's not. She actually just doesn't have very good social skills. So the 3, a would-be self, she's got her sort of home economics, really feminine, can cook anything side. She's got her artistic, sort of aloof side, and she's got her sporty, energetic, hyper side. And those, she can actually transform into different sort of super-powered forms by joining up with those little characters and saying, my heart unlock. She also gets the ability to transform other people's, because there's a group of these people who have these little, what they call sugar shower, these little guardian characters. She actually turns out she can transform other people's as well. And there's a great scene where this angel one that's been following her around gets sick of waiting for her to transform, so the little character forces her to transform by going, Amber's heart, unlock! And Amber's like, throughout a transformation sequence, it's not unusual, it's just like, the music starts out and she's like, what the hell? Why is this work? Why are you having forced to transform? And she's also holding 2 ice creams that are still there. Also, that angel character is just an entire joke character, because she's got an attack move. Like, she first transforms into this angel character, and her first magical attack is white flag of surrender. What was the point of that? But yeah, this is one that has a lot of daft things to it, but I find it incredibly endearing because it plays around with the tropes and takes the piss out of itself quite a lot. I find it amuses me. I'm going to move on. Oh yeah, the other thing that gets me about this series is it's got this big egg thing. So as I said, she apparently lays 3 eggs. She then joins up with a bunch of other characters who have these Shugosharu who are fighting the Easter Corporation, who are looking for a magical heart egg, because everybody in this world, when they're a child, has an egg in their heart that's got their ugly self in it. Yeah. Somebody out there has got what called the embryo that can grant wishes. And Easter's looking for that and forcibly extracting them from people. And she transforms with a transformation device called the Humpty Lock. And the bad guys have the corresponding thing, which is called the Dumpty Key. Yeah. So, yeah. Right. There's been more magical girls other than that, obviously, but I couldn't go on with every series because I think I'd be still here by possibly Amecon 2018 if I had to go over every series. But we're going to now look at some of the shows that were actually aimed at all the demographics. Many of these are parodies, or some of them are serious or semi-serious. There's one very serious one, which I think you're all expecting me to talk about. Hello, Cubie!
Hello!
Do you really not hit yet? You'll just come back to life and then eat your days. Well, I'll try and surmise what I know about it, because it is something that I don't want to spoil for you.
The first rule of Madoka Magica is you don't talk about Madoka Magica.
Yeah, I know.
Happy and sunshine and everything's perfect.
Josh!
He's the best character.
Josh!
A lot of the core magical girls are aimed at the young female audiences. Inevitably going to be some that start to play around with the demographic, aimed at older audiences, or there's at least a couple of cases where it's, well, lingerie senshi papillon rose. Which will tell you what that's about, but I'll give just look adorable, all cute pastel colours, the magical girls that look like they're having fun, but they're sweet-looking masculine character cuties. Don't let this show fool you for a second. I've actually purposefully put as little as I can up there that just basically surmises the first episode, because if we go into it, it will massively spoil it. I'm not going to go beyond saying that, except basically, Madoka Kaname is an apparently ordinary teenager who one day stumbles across the fact that magical girls exist in her world and fight these grotesque beings called witches. She stumbles across this when an enigmatic, aloof character called Homura Akemi, the one with the black hair, transfers into her school. And Madoka later finds Homura. I mean, Homura gives her the cold soda essentially from the get-go, but Madoka basically comes across Homura fighting this cute little Kyubey thing, thinking, well, why is she fighting this thing? Then suddenly the witch shows up and she watches Homura fight, but Homura gives her the distinct. She tells him, I don't want you getting involved with this because you don't want to be a magical girl. You shouldn't become a magical girl. This confuses Madoka, who this is like the first couple of episodes. Later bumps into the blonde-haired girl, their Mami Tomo, who is friends with Kyubey, essentially, and they let her know that basically any young girl who wants to, who Kyubey has approached, can get a wish in return to becoming sort of indebted to the cause of fighting these witches, and you can grant any wish you should so want. And Madoka has to decide whether this is something she wants to do, if there's a wish she wants hard enough to make that commitment, or if she should listen to Homura's warning. And I'm going to leave it at that, because that pretty much is the extent to which I can go without horrifically spoiling it. And you don't want to spoil Madoka. It's something that really should be experienced. So I'll leave that and I won't spoil it. But it is good. I recommend it. I will at least say it's not like other magical girl shows. I'll give you that much.
It's the Evangelion.
Yes, it's what Evangelion did for Super Robots, Madoka basically does for magical girls. It's only 12 episodes. There's a lot of spin-off manga as well now. It's just exploded in popularity. Right.
There's a movie as well.
Yeah. And movies. Yeah. Some more examples of stuff they're actually aimed at older audiences. Earth Maiden Arjuna. Juna, an ordinary teenager on the day she died in a motorcycle accident. She's then approached by, she then, while she's leaving Earth as a ghost, she sees the Earth is actually being attacked by worm-like creatures called Raja, who basically sort of represent the suffering of a planet. It's like, I think there's, I've heard somebody surmise it as Captain Planet and the Planeteers with existentialism and Taoism.
Those are hamburgers.
She's then approached by a boy called Chris. Chris, because you know I'm used to figures being called like the great Kyubey or the great spiritual being from the flower world, but he's called Chris. Yeah, it probably is, but this is what it wound up being translated. He appears before her and offers to resurrect her if she can agree to protect the Earth. She's then given the role of the Avatar of Time, a being who can decide the fate of the planet, and it's one of the dark, more existential takes on the role. Lingerie Century Papillon Rose. Adult magical girl show in that sense the word out. Again, I don't think it's actually what you would define as out and out porn, but it's very, very ecchi. It's like very, it's basically they have transformations phrases have got words like erection in them. Also, they've run on the underwear, as you can see. And they made a TV series of it that's somewhat tame, but still quite fan servicey. And the fight is against a group of transvestites who spread STDs. Yeah, well, that's, you know, that's politically correct, isn't it? Maho Shoujo Lyrical Nano. Nano was, this is based on, there was an earlier anime series which was actually based on a game. But basically, Nanoha was a little girl from that who wasn't very powerful in the original version, but they decided to make a magical girl spin-off about her, but actually aim it at a male demographic, an older male demographic, because I realised that a lot of guys like to watch magical girls as well. And it basically kind of worked out. Yeah, it kind of it actually kind of ended up doing a lot of nods to Gundam and all the mecha shows, and it's very popular. There's been it started off as magical girl lyrical Nanoha, even though she doesn't really use the word lyrical very much, because she out and out says straight off that it doesn't. It's as far as she's concerned, it's a nonsense word. She later grows up and more ultimately winds up as being sort of the captain of a command of magical warriors. 25 when she's 25, so you can't really call it magical girl anymore. So I think they just went for lyrical Nanoha after a while. Parodies. There's Jungle Echo there with a massive and the main character with massive breasts. Given the fact that beforehand she was a little girl and she's just transformed into this like huge bezooming character who has one of the most dodgy transformation sequences I've ever seen in my life. This has even been parodied in the West in the Mega XLR episode, the Ultra Chicks, which basically is a Sailor Moon parody, and a parody of Ultraman at the same time, because they transform into giant robots. Themselves, I don't mean they get in, I mean they turn into giant robots. Some examples of parodies. Pretty Sammy. I think a lot of people know Pretty Sammy because it's a spin-off of Tenchi. And the concept being that they reuse the characters from Tenchi a bit differently. So Tsunami in this version isn't an older version of Tsunami. She's a different character. She's a candidate for Queen in the magical realm. And she has to pick a champion on Earth in the form of Sasami, who can transform into Pretty Sammy and fight the evil love monsters, I think they're called, if I remember correctly. Her rival, Pixie Misa, who is the representative of Rumia, who also wants to be queen of this magical realm, sent against her. And Pixie Misa is Sami's best friend, Misao, but Misao doesn't know she's Pixie Misa because it's sort of, she just turns into Pixie Misa. The way in this is a parody is the fact that it sort of makes nods to how ludicrous some of the magical girl things are. For example, Sasami doesn't really look any different to as she normally does, and they actually make at the end of the series, she actually says, "Oh no, I've got to reveal my secret that I'm Pretty Sammy to all of my classmates," and all the classmates are like, "Oh, we already knew. It's kind of obvious. You look exactly the same. We just haven't told you because we didn't want to disappoint you." There's been several versions of that. The OVA. The original, when it showed up in Tenchi Muyo itself, originally, as well, Sasami Magical Girls Club, The next one is Daimaho Toje, or Magical Witch Puri-chan. Basically the premise being one of these magical witches from a magical land and a magical queen in this test who is evil. And what I'm going to do for this is, give me a moment, I'm going to backtrack on there. Is if I can get my... I'm going to show you the opening sequence to this because honestly it just slices it so beautifully out of it. Oh, the pictures. That she knows wrestling moves and can kill you anyway. The pink girl of love and courage, Tonne Burin. This was actually aimed at little girls, but it just plays the magical girl trope straight, except that she turns into a pig. Instead of turning into a beautiful princess or a super warrior, she turns into a pig, and her transformation sequence is hilarious. I'm going to see if I've got. I'm going to show you this, and I'm going to show because I showed it last year, but I've actually got the process of her turning back into human as well, which is hilarious. I didn't have that last time. Just stopped in this. Yeah, that was a parody series, but it otherwise played the trope straight, except instead of having like magical which actually just basically a pig with Superman's power set. It's going to fly around and save people from burning buildings and what have you. Some anime, some not. Right, this is the section on anime, on magical girls worldwide, big direct inspirations or indirect ones. Gem was too early, really, before magical girls got popular in the West, but she just happens to basically be a magical idol singer, so I've included her anyway, because let's face it, she is pretty much follows the same tropes, other than she doesn't get older, she just gets bigger hair, because it's the 80s. I'm going to go over a few examples of Western magical girls. She-Ra, I mean, it's basically just He-Man, but repurposed for women, which basically means it's a magical girl series, because that's essentially what happens, except you could argue that He-Man's a magical girl series, only he's a dude, and he loses a lot of his out of his clothes. I mean, I saw the later early 2000s versions of He-Man where it kind of made sense, because he did visibly look like a different person, he looked older, but in the 80s he didn't. In the 80s he just lost his shirt and then nobody recognised him. Gem and the Holograms. Jericho Benton inherits a record label and an orphanage from her late father. Unfortunately, her father has left half of his record label to Eric Raymond, who wants to oust her and starts bullying her over this, and has sponsored a band called the Misfits, who are pretty much criminally negligent, because they make several attempts on people's lives and yet get away with it, because it's, you know, pop stars can do that apparently. Princess Guinevere and the Jewel Riders, or Starla and the Jewel Riders, because they had different names depending on what part of the world you live in. Guinevere, or Starla, in the UK, is the princess of Avalon, the Avalon of Arthurian myth. She's on a mission to rescue her mate Merlin from banishment, and she fights an evil aunt named Kale, who wants to take over the kingdom. She and her friends transform into the Star Riders with magical gems, and she has they have talking horses and things. It's a lot like She-Ra, only possibly a little sugarier than She-Ra. There you go. Yeah. She-Ra was actually, the thing about She-Ra is she was basically it was really interesting to have a show in the 80s that had a female cast that was largely the active fighting ones, and it was the guy that kept getting captured. So She-Ra was actually fought Hordak, who was Skeletor's teacher. So effectively, she's fighting a bigger bad guy than Skeletor. Mind you, they both kind of suck. So pretty much a moot point. WITCH was based on an Italian comic book and then animated in Italy, France, USA, co-production by Disney Europe. A story of 5 girls who discover that they're the guardians of the veil, the barrier between our world and that of Metamora, a magical place. And they have different powers. I mean, it's a bit like your typical magical girls, like fire, water, plant-based powers, air, and the main character, however, has the power of quintessence, which basically means she can talk to electronics. In the comics, yeah, she can control electronics, but she actually literally talks to them. She talks to an alarm system at the museum and it's switching itself off for her at one point in the comic.
She basically has lightning power.
And lightning power, yeah. Winx Club, it's another Italian series. The story of Bloom, who is basically the princess of a magical fairy realm who's been living on Earth without realising she's got magical powers, and she gets scouted and taken back to she gets taken to the fairy school of Althea, and it's sort of a blend between magical girls and Harry Potter, because they have to learn to control their magic, and they're actually fighting the evil witch school of cackling bad guys. This got a 4 kids dub as well, because in all honesty, the thing with 4 kids dubs is, as everybody knows, they suck, but not only that, if you actually look up who the voice talent is, a lot of the time they're actually really good voice actors in other anime where they had decent voice direction. But for some reason, when you watch 4 kids dubs, a lot of them have the most, are directed to have some of the most irritatingly over the top, grating voices ever. It's like, why? I mean, another one which I haven't put up in the 2000s was Tokyo Mew Mew, which got dubbed as Hollywood Mew Mew. And honestly, 4 kids, Sean Schemmel, who was the original Goku, was in that, and I'm sitting there watching. I know from other anime with these voice actors that they're good voice actors. What the hell is 4 kids telling these people to do? They come out with the most irritating voices ever. And Penny Crayon. Yay! I lost it. Keeps falling off. Again, you can't really say she would have been inspired by any magical girls, but I really think she basically falls into the theme so much that I would argue it has happened to be the British magical girl without actually being inspired by magical girls, just because of what she can do. She has the, if anybody doesn't know, she has the power to draw anything and it comes to life. And in typical British kid show fashion, it doesn't explain why she has these powers, but there is apparently a book out there, that, a kid's book that explains this. I'm going to show all the titles of my spell.
Penny Crayon, and go anything she likes, like cats and dogs and polka dots and juggernaut and bikes. But things and drawings are not like any other. They walk and talk and come to life, creating lots of fun. Scribble, scribble in their clothes, draw a scarecrow, tiny nose, pencils, crayons, and that then rub it out and start again. Penny Crayon, so anything she wishes, like horses, cows, rhinoceros, and snakes and ships and fishes. But we crayon drawings come alive quite magically, causing us to tremble. Just you watch and see.
Still have the odd lamppost around that you had to send a bloke round and put with a putter out there. I think it could be they were very rare, but I think they still just about existed. So yeah, there were the occasional lampposts that actually were like, this is fire. Haven't had those in a while. They've all been replaced because it's not very efficient, really. Right, what time is it? 11:51. Alright, we've got a few minutes there. I'm going to show this because this is hilarious. This is from the live action show. Well, aside. Basically, the premise of camphor is certain women are destined to be fighters or camphors. Camphor is a German one, which is actually used also as for a mobile suit in Gundam, and they make a lot of Gundam jokes in this show. Basically, anybody can be a panther, but only women can be campers. But that doesn't stop the main character being a guy. It just means this happens. In the matter, because as soon as one of the other campers in the area activates her powers, that happens to him. At one point, it doesn't help that he goes to this odd school where it's all boys school on one side and all girls school on the other side. So what happens, he's got to sort of crawl over the centre of the wall and get into the all girls school. At one point, he's stuck and he needs the loo, and they said he can't turn back, so he's sent into the women's toilet. It's like, I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out here. That's a reason. It's not one I've got here. I showed this one last year, but I'll show it again because I just genuinely think it's hilarious. And I'm sorry if anybody was last year and I'm repeating some things. I've tried to change it up a little bit. So I've introduced some different shows. But, and I've shown some different clips this time. But I'm going to show this one again because I just personally think it's hilarious. This is the Mega Sexy Large, the Western version. It does have its odd quirks, doesn't it? And I'm going to put these slides up online and probably link them in on the forums when I'm done, because there's a lot of information up there that I've gone over but I haven't gone into full depth of. I was searching around looking for a decent wallpaper, because as I said, I lost all my files and I wanted to have a thematically appropriate wallpaper for you. Poor Mammy is terrified she's going to flash somebody. I've got to look what's happening in Cuba as well. What's happening well, we'll leave that at that, because these haven't seen it, but go watch Madoka, because it is awesome, but it's very, very different.